This meeting is being recorded.
There we go. Make sure it echoes through. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we're hosting the event here in Subiaco. We're on Whadjuk land of the Noongar Nation, and we pay our respects to elders past, present here, as well as wherever you're joining us from, either here in WA or over in Naarm as well, where Shaun is. My name is Kirsty Lightfoot, and I'm the convener of the Shaun Tan Awards for Young Artists here at Subiaco Library. And today we officially launch the awards with lots of promotion and activities coming up here or in person or online. And what a way to start off our wonderful 2025 events with Shaun joining us online. Welcome, Shaun. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
It is the 23rd year of you doing this award. And with this new year, we are bringing forward a new exciting change. We are heading online with our secondary school entries as a bit of a pilot. So if you are in secondary classes, so from 7 to 12, we are inviting you to take some photos of your artwork when you do enter the awards. And if you are shortlisted, we will ask that we get the physical artwork then for the final round of judging. But we're really excited to kind of hopefully open this award even further for our regional artists, as well as anyone who potentially is a little bit further afield, even here in the metro. As we know, Perth Metro spreads out quite far and wide. All the information you need to know about the awards and everything we discussed tonight will be available online. We've added a link into the chat, and the entries will open on the 28th of April. So you've got lots of time to create your masterpiece. But that's why we wanted to do the Q&A online tonight, because we want you guys to ask all your questions. Hopefully Shaun can inspire you. Hopefully you can find out more about things you want to know when it comes to your artwork, different skills or different styles you'd like to try. And let's throw over to Shaun. So welcome again. And Shaun, for those who have joined us and maybe don't know as much about you as we do, we're very excited to have you linked to Subiaco Library. We're so proud of all the artwork you've done for us here at the library, like the tea party behind me. And we're so proud that you've been our patron for 23 years. But some people might not know all of that. So could you just give us a few sentences about who you are, what you do, and what's been being a patron like for you with these awards?
Sure. Thanks everybody for coming along this evening. So my name's Shaun Tan. I'm 23 years. That means that's half a lifetime ago, literally. But that's a long time ago, and that's about the time when I painted that mural as well, around the same time that these awards began. But my background is I was born in Fremantle. I grew up in Hillary's, went to high school in Balcatta, lived in Mount Lawley. I now live in Melbourne and have done for the past 15 years. But obviously have my roots in Perth and had a lot to do with the Subiaco Library, as you can tell from the artwork there on both sides of the wall. And I have spent most of my waking hours illustrating and writing different types of books, some for children, some for adults. But I think the fact that I often work with literature for young people means that I was approached to be part of an award, which was at the time a counterpoint to the Tim Winton Young Writers Award. And they were looking for a patron, and I said, sure. I don't know what that is, but I'll do it. And for the first few years, I was helping judge the prize, so that was very interesting. I don't think I'm a great judge, and it's best left to other people. But that was it gave me a good sense of what's involved with an art award. And the idea of the award was basically to, I think, first and foremost, just give young people a place to send their work. Because I remember when I was growing up, I entered a lot of art competitions. I wasn't really that interested in the prizes. Well, I kind of was, but it didn't matter if I didn't win them. The main thing was it had a deadline. It was somewhere to send something, and it actually got me finishing my paintings because I had to get them finished to send them to this award. And there were all different ones: the Law Society and some health organization, and they all had their different art awards. And I remember what a big deal it was if you got any kind of recognition, like if you got a little pin or certificate. It was like a huge deal because it was somebody outside of the circle of family and friends telling you, hey, this looks great to us. Like objectively, we like it. We're not saying that because we have to. We actually like it. So it was also the first time I had work exhibited, so it's very nice that with the art award we also have a little exhibition, so that for many young people that's maybe their first experience of a public exhibition, so they get to see what that's like, and uh, yeah, and just to get some insight into the what it's like to be an artist by having some sort of professional practice around it, moving from the bedroom to a public space.
Absolutely. Well, that kind of launches into one of the questions I had. And please, guys, make sure you throw your questions in the chat. We've got lots of time with Shaun, so we can get through lots of questions. How do you get past the fear and the anxiety of showing your work out to the world? Because I think that is something that a lot of young artists and young creatives across many fields struggle with. Do
Mhm.
you have any advice around that?
Yeah, putting your work out there. I think everybody struggles with that, and it's got nothing to do with your age or experience. So, even at my age and with a number of pieces I've had out there, I still struggle a little bit when I put something up, especially because all of us, particularly the older kids, like once you get to the age of about 9 and beyond, I think you start to become quite critical of your work, and you start to see more that's wrong with it than that's right with it. And then it can be quite, yeah, it can be a bit nerve wracking to put things out there. I mean, I always think that painting and drawing are kind of a really nice way of putting yourself out there, because it's not a performance, you can hide. So I kind of like the fact that you can just sort of put a picture out, you can Instagram it, put it on a wall, publish a book, and to some extent, it's not a performance. So you're not on stage, you're not public speaking or anything like that. Um, so in that sense, there's nothing to be afraid of. I'd just be the only thing I can say if you're nervous about putting your art out there is just think about the fact that you're not having to go on stage in front of a microphone, and you'll feel a lot better. Um, I guess what people are afraid of is maybe somebody saying something negative about their work, and that's never easy to take. I don't think there's anything you can really do about that. I think everybody gets a bad review, or someone might even laugh, or other kids might make fun of something. They might be jealous even and attack your work that way. Um, I think it's just something that you have to go through. It's not a bad thing if people say something bad about your work, as long as you keep doing it and you listen more to the positive criticism. Just focus on the positive. That's a very hard thing to do because we all tend to think about the negative stuff, but yeah, you just really have to also just use your own judgment. Um, and sometimes people say negative things about my work, and I agree with them. So I agree with the criticism, and those are the good criticisms. So I actually learn from that, and so I try to be a bit better in that area. Um, but some of them, often people don't understand what you're doing. That's the main thing that happens. People say bad things about your work that you like yourself. It means they just don't understand it.
Absolutely. That's really, really great advice. Speaking of kind of sticking to your own story and sticking to what you like, what was your favorite thing to create when you were younger? Like, was there a particular style you were enjoying? Was there themes that were coming out? What was your favorite thing to draw?
Mostly science fiction stuff, really. It hasn't changed very much. um, it was Star Wars. I mean, it's kind of weird now because I thought Star Wars would be ancient news by now, but it's not. It just keeps regenerating. But so I see kids drawing the same things now that I was drawing. But yeah, the first thing I ever remember drawing and being really pleased about was Darth Vader's face. And I drew that, and I was like, "Whoa, this looks exactly like it." So I was sort of startled at the magic of drawing. And then I drew a lot of things after that. I drew people and the landscapes around me, and things that I could see. But there was always the big appeal of drawing was that you're able to draw things that you can't see. And even now I'm always trying to join the two together. I'm trying to combine things that I can see every day with things that I can't. And that is the magic of drawing. So lots of robots, lots of aliens, um, lots of futuristic warfare, lots of boy stuff. Um, people. I remember just lots of drawings of little people fighting giant caterpillars and insects like that I found in my backyard, because I'd always imagine, okay, what if I was really tiny and I had to battle these things? So yeah, my parents kind of didn't really. My parents and teachers didn't really care that much about what I drew, or they didn't guide me that much. They just sort of saw what my interests were, and then encouraged whatever those interests were. So if it was dinosaurs, then they would say, here's some dinosaur books you might be interested in, and leave you to it. Yeah.
I think that's a key point that comes out when we do the art in autumn kind of workshops is needing to draw from imagination and memory is fantastic, but there's not as much discussion around like reference images. So it's great to hear that you were given dinosaur books and obviously a lot of science fiction, then you were able to kind of then take it with your imagination. Do you have any advice for artists of all ages as to how to kind of get source material, whether it's from your imagination, like how to go for walks and see the world a bit different, and also how to bring in source material that you see?
Yeah. Basically, you just have to start drawing something. It almost doesn't matter what you start drawing. So for me, I guess I realized this a little bit later in life, when I started drawing my local suburban streets, that I got really interested in them, where when I wasn't before. So I think the thing about drawing is you shouldn't worry about finding something you're interested in already. You should just start drawing anything almost randomly, and it will lead to something that you're interested in. You will find something interesting in that thing. So the main thing is to just get started. I think a lot of artists, including myself, become paralyzed because we're looking for the perfect subject. We spend a lot of time looking for a beautiful subject or something really unique or magical or somehow has all these great ideas. And you might find it, but chances are you won't. You just start drawing anything that is remotely interesting. Um, Especially a pet is always a good thing. Start drawing your pet, because that's the thing that and so if you're drawing it wrong because you know it so well. But it's also not too difficult because it's another animal. So I used to draw a lot and paint my cat a lot when I was a kid, and then you can transform it into something else. So cat would turn into a monster or whatever, or a robotic. Replace some parts with machines, it becomes robotic. But you do just have to start with something, and yeah, you'll be surprised. I mean, you probably already know this, many of you, but I find the moment I start painting a thing, no matter how boring it is, like it could be a glass of water on a table, it gets super interesting once you start drawing it, and then you really get into it. You really start seeing it as a special object. Um, so yeah, you'll notice a lot of the people that send work into this award and who have their work in the final exhibition. I'm often very interested in the ones that are like drawings of a glass of water type picture that are really amazing looking and make you realize how beautiful ordinary things are. But you don't know until you sit down and study them.
It's incredible when you can sit and pull out the details. And I do think that's something that kids are very good at when they're younger. And like you said, I think even not as an adult, even slightly older kids start to want to get the perfect thing
Yeah.
to draw and to create. Whereas The detail we had in one of our entries last year, that was from a year one, was just amazing because they just went for it, and it was
That's
just
right.
full of fun and all the little details they could see and all the ones that they couldn't see, and they added all this kind of mix of realism as well as imagination in there as well.
Yeah, and that's the other one thing I like about these art awards. They're not just for children and younger kids, but they're for artists like myself to be inspired by what particularly very young children do, and like you're saying, that they just go for it. So the really good artistic practice is painting and drawing without caring what it's for. You're just doing stuff for fun. It's got to be just fun. It's always, it doesn't matter how serious the subject is. It starts out as a fun, like the artist Paul Clay calls it, taking a line for a walk, just mucking around. And the more you do it, the more interesting things start to happen, and it can go to more interesting places. But yeah, it's really important to uh, enjoy the process and to. I think what's great about the way really young kids draw and paint is they do the action first and then they say what it is. If you've noticed, like very young children, you might remember yourselves, you draw something and then you respond to what it looks like rather than like, I am going to draw this particular thing and then you draw an outline around that thing. It doesn't quite work that way. And because they're so free and they let it evolve and they accept the accidental nature, and because they're not skilled, they don't have the level of control. They're very happy to start drawing a tree and then say it's a dragon. And that's a good artist. If you change your mind halfway through about what you're doing, um, and feel free to do that instead of constantly steering it and pushing things into some preconceived idea of what it should look like. Because it's never going to look like the thing you want. It'll never work out. Even for me, it never works out. Sometimes I have a fully formed image, try to do it, it doesn't work out. It's much better if you just let it go, and a bit like the painting in the library that you see there. That whole thing is just me going, "Who cares? I'm just drawing whatever, and I'll worry about it later, how it looks."
I love that. It fills into my fear of at story time. Don't say nice rainbow or don't say nice house, because it's probably not going to be that, and you just got to go with it because they're four and they will tell you what it is because they will draw what they choose to draw and it ends up turning into something else. We're starting to get some questions through, but just on that, considering we're talking about this letting things go and flow and just having fun with it, are you drawing every day? Like, is that something that you are still finding little pockets of quick sketch time to try and bring that joy and that
Yeah,
freedom?
I should. I should. It's like physical exercise or gardening or anything. You're meant to be doing it a little bit all the day, all the time if you want it to work out well. But I don't. Partly because there's so many other things in life to do. Um, I do keep sketchbooks, and I think a lot of yeah, I really should get back into the habit of drawing in them more frequently. I can show examples of they're often just little books like this, and I'll draw stuff in them. Just like again, I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I'm just drawing often with a biro, like really cheap pen, and these are really cheap. No, I don't use fancy art sketchbooks because it feels too important and it makes me stiffen up and worry about ruining things. So I just draw, um, and often I draw tiny little pictures, lots and lots of tiny little pictures the size of postage stamps. Mostly, again, because I don't want it to feel important. And a lot of my best ideas come from just, you know, not taking it very seriously. Here's a page I'll show you. Where I started thinking about a cicada working in an office. Like not very good drawings, pretty scruffy. But just saying, okay, what would that look like? You know, if a cicada wore a business suit, and how can I make that work? And you can see a little, I don't know if you can see that little sketch where he's kind of breaking free out of his old body, which became a key moment in the story that that eventuated from those sketches. But yeah, that the sketchbooks are great because I don't really show, unless I'm doing a Zoom call like this, I don't really show them to anybody, and so I don't have to worry about, again, making mistakes or things looking not quite right. It's purely about playing with ideas to try and get somewhere. Um, so yeah, I mean, I should really do sketch every day, but it's difficult.
Say life is life, that's absolutely fine. But yeah,
It's also because, it's my job, and it's a bit of a problem sometimes if you make your hobby your work, because then when you have free time, the last thing I wanna be doing is working. I just wanna do something else. So I'll generally wanna watch TV or play a game with my kids or take the dog for a walk. I don't really wanna be drawing again.
that's fair. I think it's great advice though about having a sketchbook and kind of just going with it and doing the little details. We've got a question online about your media processes. You use such an assortment of them. Did this happen by accident for you? And what advice would you give students in terms of media and techniques and bringing that all together?
Well, I can kinda answer both of those questions at once. I think the reason that I use a lot of different media is, um, I went to, high school. I went to Balcatta High School, which had a special art program, and, one of the things they sort of emphasized was try to use lots of different media. Just try all of them. Etching and pen and ink, watercolor, acrylic, oils, bronze casting, you name it. And just I think the experience of that was good because it made me realize that it's not such a big deal to change media. At first it's difficult and it doesn't work. Like when you first start using oil paint, it's like painting with butter. You know, imagine trying to do a portrait on a piece of toast with butter. It's like that, and so it drives you crazy. But then after a while, like with anything, you get the hang of it, and you're able to express a certain style that you didn't know you could do. And so for me, it's exciting to try new media because it's always difficult at first, but then at some point, some new kind of picture starts emerging, and it's a part of me that I didn't know was there. And I think a lot of artists have this, young artists especially, have this idea that I need to pick a style and media, like almost like my signature stuff that makes me identifiable or something I'm really good at. And that's a good thing to do. It's good to have a favorite medium and a certain subject and style that you're very good at. But that's not really who you are. And it never will be. Who you are is the person who placed in multiple different situations acts a certain way. So you got to really test yourself. And all art is about testing yourself. So every time you do a new piece of art, it should be a little bit of a new challenge, and that keeps it fun as well. It'll also make it difficult, sometimes make you want to pull your hair out, but it will actually keep you excited about both the fun and the difficulty of making art. It should be both. It should be a little bit fun and a little bit difficult. If it's completely fun, it's probably not a great picture. And if it's completely difficult, it's probably not a great picture. But if it's a strange mix of fun and difficulty, I think you'll find you'll have quite a satisfying experience and you'll produce something that you like. But yeah, I would just say the simple advice would be try everything. And some media you'll find you just hate them. And you can never get used to them, and that's okay. But you'll be surprised at how many things you're good at. It's like I always think maybe I'm really good hockey player or snooker player. I've never really done them, but but we've all got talents that we don't know that we have until we actually try certain things. So
That's awesome. Following on with I guess media and then medium, is there a particular medium that you love to work with but you don't actually use that often? So something that you find really enjoyable but maybe don't get the space to?
um yes, sculpture. So that was probably my first love, particularly in primary school was, and also high school, was sculpture. And the thing I like about sculpture is that you're making things rather than just the illusion of things. So when you paint, you're creating a illusionistic magic trick of objects in space. And when you sculpt, you're just making those objects. So a lot of I've been able to bring some of it into my work. So I did a book some years ago where I illustrated uh, most of Grimm's fairy tales using sculptures, and that was great. It was probably the most fun book that I did, and I've been wanting to do it for decades, really. And I finally found a subject and an excuse to just make these little sculptures out of clay and photograph them. And so that was fun. If you want to see it, this is the book that's called The Singing Bones, which might be in your library. And yeah, that was so. Yeah, this is. I love doing these sorts of little, very simple sculptures. Even when I did the book Cicada, I started off making sculptures. So that's the Cicada. It helps me to think about characters in stories, like if I can see them fully in the round and understand all their parts, and I start to believe in the character, because I have to believe in them to a large extent in order to tell a story. It has to feel real to me, otherwise it just feels like a string of lies. um, so the reason I don't do much sculpture is because it's messy and requires a lot of space and materials, and I also don't have much space to put all this stuff. And yeah, so even after I did that book of the Grimm's fairy tale sculptures, I sold them all almost immediately after making them, because I had no place to store them. I just needed to get rid of them, and they break and things like that. So paintings and drawings are far more convenient, but I love sculpting things.
I think everyone might be inspired now to spend some weekend trying to find space in their house to do some sculpting.
It's very slow too. That's the other thing. Sculpting is super slow.
Yeah.
But I think as human animals, we're born to sculpt, whether it's carving boats or, whatever, or just making objects that we can use. When I sculpt, especially with clay, sometimes I'm not even looking at it. I'm using my hands as much as my eyes, so it's almost like your whole body goes into it. So it feels like a very normal thing to be doing, is sculpting with clay.
It's a very beautiful way to put that too. We've got a question from Una and Aaron, and they're wondering what your opinion is about how art has changed over time.
You mean like thousands of years, or like past 10 years? Over
I think
time,
more recently, I'm assuming.
I guess I can only comment. Okay, how has art changed over? Okay, first of all, the thousands of years, it hasn't. Okay, it's the same. And that's one thing I love about it, is that there's this saying that when you do art, or when you do any creative work, you're breaking bread with the dead, meaning it's almost like you're having a dinner party with dead people. Because all humans have been doing the same thing for thousands of years. It's like, I mentioned that sculpture feels like a natural thing to do. All art making is a natural human thing to do for all of us. It's not just for artists. Everybody, in one form or another, does creative work, even when they don't realize that's what they're doing. So yeah, I don't see much difference between cave painting or Aztec stone relief, Renaissance fresco, or somebody doing a weird plastic object in a contemporary art gallery. It's all kind of the same thing. And that's what I love about it. There's real continuity. And some artists might say, I'm doing revolutionary work that's different to all preceding work. No, that's not true. It's all the same. It's always continuous. We're all part of the same mind in a way. We're all humans are the same, exploring the same things. And that's one thing that's really great if you become an artist or work in the arts, is whenever you sit down and have a conversation with another artist, there's so many things that you can agree about and talk about. It's the opposite of politics. Everybody is almost together, understanding each other and the process. And they'll show you their sketchbook. It'll look like your sketchbook. They'll explain their studio practice. It'll be very similar to your studio practice. Doesn't matter whether you're from Iran or Norway. All these artists talk together very freely. And so that's one thing I really love about becoming, in my case, an author and illustrator, is meeting so many other people that are like me, and we have so much in common, and probably with our ancestors too. The other question of how has art changed? In my lifetime, obviously digital stuff, and of course that's really snowballing now with AI. Um, it means that I think it's easier. It's kind of all over. It's a good thing. Um, Digital art has meant, and social media platforms has meant it's easier to show your work. It was when I was growing up, it was almost impossible to show your work in any kind of public way. You imagine a world without the internet, uh, aside from a local community exhibition. No, there wasn't any way to show your work, and even then, hardly anybody would see it. So, we're living in quite an amazing age where you can produce images, and the tools are so great that you can use to produce images, and get them out to people. So there's no real limit. Problem is that art doesn't really thrive in limitless spaces. Art works with limits. Oil paint that's like butter on toast, tiny sketchbooks, clay that pushes back and doesn't do what you want it to do. That makes good art. So I early on I dabbled with a lot of digital tools, like most people, because I thought this could be a really useful thing. One thing that bothered me about digital artwork, and it's the same with AI and a lot of other technologies, is it does exactly the thing you want it to do. So it didn't really, I couldn't have a conversation much with digital media. Other people have become good at using it, but it didn't really work for me because I was used to materials that resist, and I go to mix one color and another color comes out, and that gives me an idea that I didn't have before. That's the way I work. And I think my advice in the current environment is I would definitely try all digital materials, including AI, but try and keep your wits about you, and assess if the results are actually good. And there's no simple ways of saying what's good and bad, but you will feel it. You will know if it feels right or feels wrong. And you have to keep coming back to that question: is does it feel good? Not popular, but does it feel good to you? And I think all through my life, I've seen a lot of bad, very popular art succeed over other kinds of art, which was much better, but more honest and simple and direct, and purer expression of actual feeling. So, yeah, there's no real rules, but I think you just have to be very careful about making artwork that is a spectacle, that looks very nice, but doesn't really have any feeling behind it, versus artwork that may not actually look that polished, looks a little bit scruffy, but actually has more kind of feeling and honest expression behind it. In other words, the really good art often doesn't always look that good. And vice versa. So, but yeah, I think it's a tricky time that we're working in. Um, especially with AI, which is a whole different thing that artists are still trying to get their head around. But it's the biggest problem is that not that we train AI, but AI trains us to look at things in a dumber way. Okay, so none of the AI art I've seen has been particularly interesting. Well, it's been interesting, but it hasn't really elicited an emotional response from me or taught me anything. And so that's always the question that I come back to.
I think that's a fantastic comment on where art is going, but also, yeah, AI, because that does always come up as a question. And I think that's the best bit about art and sharing art is how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
Um, and that does sometimes lack in some of the, yeah, AI stuff that we're seeing and some of the digital art as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing AI art that actually moves me and makes me think. And I've seen a few bits that sort of do that. It hasn't quite done it the way traditional art has. And I don't know if I'm old-fashioned or if it's something wrong with the technology because I try to keep an open mind, but I'm looking forward to seeing some AI stuff that is actually good and really unusual.
Yeah, it will be out there, I'm sure. I'm sure someone will figure out how to handle it and put
Yeah,
their
well,
feel
the art
on
awards might have to deal with this question at some point too.
it.
So it is
Yeah, we're
true,
thinking
a
about it.
troublesome issue for art awards.
It is. We have a question from Katie, which was, what has your process been to actually get your work seen and out in the world? And you kind of beautifully started segueing into it with the move towards digital and those benefits. But yeah, what is your process to get your art in the world and to get it seen?
Yeah, so I could explain my process, but it's so redundant now that I'm not sure if it matters. But what did I do? I think back when I started being an illustrator, and I guess that was the time when, I was doing a lot of painting and stuff, but I didn't exhibit it. When I started illustrating, I was aware that, okay, now my work is being reproduced, sometimes thousands of times, so people actually get to see it. Lots of people that I haven't met before. And it began by working with these very small science fiction magazines based in Perth. And they had pretty small print runs. But that was the first time I had these little black and white illustrations reproduced and distributed. And they were technically publicly available, even though they're very obscure publications. And I would get feedback, people would actually write letters to the magazine and they would comment on my artwork. So that was great. And that emboldened me to pursue a career as an illustrator. The fact that readers seemed to really like what I was doing. And step by step, I sort of did more and more complicated projects until getting to the point of, doing picture books, which have quite a big audience and a potential international audience. Yeah, I'm not really sure how to answer that question because I don't think anybody these days would, depend on small press magazines to get their work out. They would go straight to some digital platform or um, I think the challenge these days isn't really getting your work out because that's easy. The challenge is doing original work because we almost have so much access to stuff and the amount of content that we consume visually can be overwhelming. And it can actually lead to a kind of feeling of being dilute, like there's nothing you can contribute that's original because no matter what you think of, you'll find a better version of it that somebody else has done because there's this tsunami of material. So I think the bigger question is how does one do good work, good, unique work? And to some extent, you do have to put yourself in a little bit of a bubble, I have to say, to produce really good, unique work. That is, not look too much at what other people are doing and just focus on your own sketchbook and your own ideas and don't compare yourself to other people because that's really creative death and it leads to a lot of anxiety and depression if you start comparing yourself to other people. You got to create a little bubble. And so I think I had some advantage early on in being trapped against my will in a little bubble because I couldn't access or expose the kind of work I was doing or see other people's work very much. And so I was left alone just to think about my own stuff and develop these weird little stories like the Lost Thing and give them to a publisher. And yeah, so I think there's a lot to be said for a certain creative isolation and just doing your own thing and then putting it out and not too much. Don't put too much out, just a little bit to get the kind of feedback that you need and to be part of a community. But don't show everything that you do. It's just not necessary, and it can be I think I might be wrong, but I think it could be damaging a little bit to show too much of your work.
That's honestly really great advice because I think that is a nature now that we overshare.
Yeah,
And sometimes that puts you in a very vulnerable place. And like you said earlier, that you know your story, and just because someone doesn't necessarily resonate with it doesn't mean that it's bad.
yeah.
So you can, yeah, put yourself at a bit of a vulnerability there. Kind of looping back through, we've got a fabulous question from Zach, which was, how old were you when you started drawing?
I don't remember.
Just drew it
Um,
with a pencil in hand.
yeah. So I don't remember, but I do remember one of the first drawings that I ever did. But I was obviously drawing long before then because it was a pretty good drawing, the one that I remember doing, and it's actually in a book that I published a few years ago called Creature, and it's the first illustration in the book, um, and it's just of two dinosaurs, and I it's funny. I always thought I was 5, but I managed to recover the picture from my parents' house and take it out of the frame. And I looked on the back, and I was 3 when I did the drawing. But I do have a very clear memory, maybe one of the few memories of that age, of drawing that dinosaur. And I remember what I was thinking and everything. That's another beautiful thing about drawing is I seem to always remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when I look at one of my drawings. Like I remember it was really planted in my brain what was going. I don't remember much other stuff, but I remember what I was doing when I was drawing each picture. So yeah, I was about 3 years old, and not all my drawings were great, but this one I must have been particularly inspired or something at the time because it was a really good picture, I think, and I can see that I really enjoyed drawing it.
I think it's been wonderful when kids keep going with it and feel encouraged. And I think that's why we love the awards here so much, because it does help promote that, keep drawing, keep going, keep creating. Um, I don't know what's happening with our little chat, but everything's kind of linking very beautifully. So the next question fits in with your childhood again. And it's from Michelle, and it says, do you find your artwork may be a way to connect with your childhood? Because it obviously goes into your illustrations as a children's book author, and connect with your childhood self.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, for sure. Because I don't think about my childhood self much otherwise, unless I'm playing game with my kids that reminds me of something I did as a kid. Um, yeah, drawing definitely connects me with all my memories. Um, so I think everything, and that's something you'll find yourself when you draw, is when it's working well. It's a kind of a meditative state where you're able to trawl through the library of your memories because little things that you draw remind you of stuff. It's almost like memories that you can't access, but um, you can recognize if they're triggered. And the little drawings will remind you. And it can be all sorts of things, little subtle shades of color, the combination of lines, and it'll trigger different memories. And the same with writing. When you're writing stories, you start off, I don't know what to write. You write a little bit, and gradually all these little voices from the past start chattering away. And at least when it's working, it becomes much easier as the thing becomes more complicated and more memories become accessed. But definitely, um, a lot of the memories aren't specific memories, but they're more memories of feelings. So, and that's what you need when you're making artwork, is you're trying to use the memory of feeling. In fact, maybe that's what all art is. It's the memory of feelings. Um, Art is about responding to things that you remember. It's not really reacting to things that are happening right now. It's like things that happened that you've had a little bit of time to digest and think about. And then you get to a little quiet space, a desk or your bedroom or whatever, and you can quietly think about things that have happened to you. I often find myself, um, memories that are too recent don't really help me that much with my work. It needs to almost be a bit old memories where there's filtered over time to work out which are the strong ones.
absolutely. I love that. I think that's a beautiful way to put art in that way, that it is your feelings and those things that come through, and it's the memory of feelings. We've got a really interesting one, and I think we're interested from the Subiaco Library side. What keeps you coming back to this and to Subiaco Library year after year, and what can event managers do to better support creatives like yourself?
Well, first of all, the library keeps reminding me of it, because otherwise I'd probably, I'd probably slip my mind. It's like, oh, we need a poster. It's like, oh yes, that's right. The awards are coming up. I think the thing that keeps me coming back to it is just seeing the entries like each year. Like, so when I see them, and again, it reminds me so much of my own experience of painting and drawing as a kid, and how how complex and fun and liberating it was to just be doing these things. And yeah, I feel a great sense of also, I again, because as a child I benefited so much from the support of teachers and other similar kinds of awards, where they're, really well run awards where adult judges took kids' work really seriously. That I feel that it's necessary to give something back, and to return the favor. In terms of making how to support creators like myself, I'm not really sure what that means exactly, but I think um, I think it's all just, I get the pleasure for me is just seeing the work of what the kids do. And then the Subiaco Awards have been really well run. Um, it's been great, And well, I guess one thing is, right from the very beginning, it was very clear to us that the what the awards were, that it wasn't kind of a competition, and that we never had big prizes. So we didn't want it to be about the prizes, and even now, the prizes they're very modest, practical prizes. They're exactly the kind of things that you might find useful if you're an artist. Um, uh, like colored pencils and things like that. Um, so I've never been a fan of adult art awards with giant cash prizes. I personally think that's a very bad idea. But I like the idea of awards still. I don't like competitions and contests, but I like awards. I like the opportunity to have some review of work, and not to say this is better than that, but to say, here are some really great things, or what we think are really great. What do you think about it? And so anything that has a discussion about the work is the main thing for me. The exhibition, the prizes is one thing, but then to have an exhibition and a discussion. And I love it and kids are very frank. They'll just walk around and say, well, this one should have won because it's got this and this and this. And that's exactly the conversation that you want to be having, because there aren't any really one work better than another. It's really just about everyone's just guessing with art. We're all just guessing, trying to figure out what's good and what's not. It's a real mystery. And this is just a conversation starter. Every award is just a conversation starter.
I think that's a really important thing to note about like your patronage and the legacy that it leads, because when we do the judges evening every year, there's the Shaun Tan of it, and we all talk about the elements and the stories that come through, and the importance of discussion. And it's not, we there was a question of, do we have like one big winner, and it was no, because there's this legacy that people who help run the award want to keep, is that it's just encouragement and it's just good art, not who's the best. And even when we get our prizes from Jackson's and at Art Supplies, it's like you said, it's very curated to each artist that is a winner, and it's small, but it's a little note to them and a nod to them about the mediums that they've used and what kind of materials could help encourage them into different forms. So it's a really kind of process that goes through everything, this element of discussion of art and promotion of art versus competition, which I think is really
Yeah.
valuable.
It's really great the way you do it, and I think that's the main thing is that it feels very practical appreciation of art, not sort of not a kind of like anything to do with prestige or those sorts of things. And those things have a place in society, I think, but not in art. You know, save it for horse races and stuff like that. Art is a whole different thing. Art is for everybody, and it should be extremely. Everybody should be made to feel included, and everybody should feel that they are, are a winner by submitting something to the award. The main thing I always think is just that, like it was for me as a kid, is that there's a deadline, and you get things finished. Anything that helps young people finish a piece of work is useful, because that's often the difficulty, is finishing something. Um, and for adult artists too, it's just getting something finished. And in some ways, the awards set up this sort of arbitrary deadline, like an imaginary thing that forces other people to submit at a certain time. And it's the most useful thing in the world I can say as a professional artist, is someone just giving me a deadline. It's the most helpful thing in the world. So yeah, just something to send, somewhere to send something to, and it can be anything. That's the other good thing about the award. You can really just do whatever you want.
Yeah, there's no limits to it. We've got two questions from Zach, and I guess because we're talking about the inclusivity of art, it might not be just for kids; it could be for everybody. But he'd asked, "What would be your top tips for kids around art?" And then also, how big do you think your imagination is?
Yeah, top tips for art for kids. Well, I think, as we've discussed already this evening, try lots of different media. Just try them. Um, if you see something that you like, uh, you know, whether it's something in a movie or something in an art gallery or something in a book, I would try to copy it. And I know there was this big thing when I was in school: don't copy. You must never copy. I pretty much learned how to draw by copying things, not copying and saying this is mine, but knowingly copying. This is what artists have done, you know, for countless generations, is copying other people's work. It's a very good exercise to do. If you see something you really like, you try and copy it. See if you can do it too. Um, and I think I going back to early childhood memories of drawing, I learned how to draw by tracing with baking paper on books. So I'd trace, and I got to understand the shapes of things and how different shapes put together make a dinosaur, or a horse, or a building. That it's all made up of these funny little mechanical parts. You put them together, and you get this magic trick of a drawing. So copying things, but you'll find that when you do copy something, the natural impulse, and kids already know this, is to do your own version of that thing. So you might start going, I'm going to do an exact replication of this picture because I love it so much. Inevitably, other parts of you are going to want to change that. And so originality will force its way in over time, but you shouldn't be too afraid to copy. The other thing at school is we were always told, do not use an eraser. Um, and I think that's pretty good advice, actually. Don't use an eraser, but also do use it. So try not to use it too much. That's all. Don't rub out everything just because it's wrong. Just keep going with it, but definitely erase and start again. Redo things if you want to, just to see how it goes. And the other tip I'd have, very practical tip, is try not to use black. I know this is a weird thing to say, but uh, try not to use absolute black and absolute white when you're painting. And the only reason is that you can't go lighter or darker once you hit when you hit those high and low notes. There's no more room. So always go very dark and very light, but never to the. Always have that. If you want to do that little highlight on the eyeball or something, leave a little bit of space to do the white dot. If you want to have a really, something's too dark and you can't see, oh, I can always come in right at the end with my black pencil if I really need it and do an outline. So I remember a teacher once saying that, and I was like, I'm going to use black as much as I want. But over time, I've realized actually that was a really good advice. Use a very dark brown or a very dark blue. Don't go black if you can avoid it.
That's a really practical piece of advice that I hadn't thought about, but very important. Una and Aaron asked, what is your favorite piece of art that you've created? Now, I know that might be like picking children, but is there one that stands out to you?
Favorite piece of art. There's one painting I did when I was about 20, and a few people have wanted to buy it over the years, and I haven't sold it, even though I could have used the money a lot at the times when I was asked. And it's not really my favorite painting, but it's maybe my most important one for me because it's a painting of a landscape in Craigie. There's just like a bend in the road, and there's some trees, and there's some crows. I might be able to pull it out and show it actually. And I think the reason it's important is because I was doing it at a time when I was really struggling with my identity as an artist, and I wasn't sure if if I wanted to be an artist. It was all seeming a little bit difficult. I was having no luck generating any kind of income from it. So I didn't think it would be a successful career. This is the painting here. It's in this book, by the way, Creature. You might recognize that image. If I can get it on the camera without a shine. So that's it. It's a landscape in Craigie. I forget which road it is. It's maybe on the way up to Ocean Reef Road. And just a kind of bend in the road with a certain light with these shaggy chewit trees and these houses huddled there. And I felt that was the first time I felt I'd really captured a feeling that I was having about a place. It sort of captured something that was very familiar, and I felt that I'd accomplished something. I look at it now and I can see a lot of things wrong with the painting, but and also it uses too much black in the foreground, and I couldn't get it any darker. But yeah, it's a hard question to answer, which is your favorite painting, because it is like I like them all pretty equally, but that was one where something happened to go right, and I felt that okay, I think no matter what other people think, I think I'm a pretty good painter. Once I did that picture, I liked it.
That's beautiful. We have a question. We're talking about finishing, and you kind of said deadlines help, but is there anything else? So Bryony asked, what helps you finish these days? Because now you obviously got a few projects on the go and life's busy. And Bryony is a fellow illustrator with a lot on her plate. So what helps you finish these days?
Yes, hello. What helps me finish these days? A schedule. It sounds boring, but it's the same with any other kind of work. A written outline plan and a schedule with little boxes that I can tick. That's very important. Is the satisfaction of being able to tick little box. So if it's a book, okay, I finished the draft sketch. Tick. I finished a prelim study. Tick. I finished. So very methodical, and I actually learned this from working with film, like on a number of animation projects. And animation is a very complicated way of producing visual images, and there's so much stuff that has to be organized, and they do it by creating these really complicated maps and charts with all these different colors, and they can actually measure the progress because it's also very expensive and you have to account for everything. Just so I learned from working with those people, oh, it really helps in a project if you break everything down into little bits and then have a very nice chart of all those little bits. Sounds very nerdy, but it's an essential practice, especially if the project's a bit complicated. And I think it's the problem with not finishing is sometimes that the work feels overwhelming. Like there's too much to do, and it's hard to see how to do it. And that's especially true with a book and a longer book because they're really big projects to do a book. I break it down into little tiny pieces, and then it's more digestible, and it's easy to feel a sense of accomplishment. So I can just do one little piece and go, okay, yes, I did something. When it's a really big thing, um, it gets very difficult if you keep looking at the whole thing. It can be paralyzing, and you just don't really want to continue with it. And a lot of younger people find they're doing a very complicated drawing or painting, and then they just get really bored with it. And I think the reason you get bored is that you're thinking too much about the whole thing. If you break it down into little parts and then only occasionally think about the whole thing, you don't get that mental tiredness.
I think that's fantastic advice for books. And I know a lot of our young artists want to go into illustration and animation, all these big projects, but also for finishing work, hopefully leading into the awards as well. So it's beneficial all around, and also just life in general. All those big tasks that get overwhelming is always breaking it
The
down.
other thing I will say, one other thing for finishing stuff is you tell somebody else about it.
Yeah.
Just tell somebody else about it, and then you'll feel bad that you're not finishing it because they'll be asking. If you just set a deadline for yourself, I'm telling you, if you just set a deadline for yourself and you keep it secret, you're never going to meet that deadline. Never. You're just going to keep giving yourself extensions. So for me, I often have an editor on a project. Like if it's a book, it's usually just one person. And I'm always thinking, oh, it's Wednesday. I got to show them something by Saturday because I said I would. I told them. That's the only reason. And then I don't want to sort of fail. So just telling, if you tell somebody, I'm going to finish this thing by such and such a day, it'll help a great deal with you getting things done. Don't just tell yourself, you got to tell somebody else.
There you go. So everyone who's wanting to enter, tell your mum and dad or tell your grandma, tell someone, and they can be on top of it. Zach also asked, what inspires you when you draw?
That's a big question. What inspires me when I draw? I think one of the things that inspires me generally, and this is really helpful if you get stuck too, is just going on a really long walk. And I've heard other artists say the same thing, that they'll go on a long walk. And there's something about walking, and maybe because you're a bit like yoga, because you're doing something with your body as well as just thinking. Sitting at a desk is actually not always so great for being creative. But doing something else often is, like walking somewhere, like whether it's a familiar environment or a new environment. And as I walk, I tend to tune in more to visual details, and I notice things, or my mind starts thinking, asking questions or thinking up stories. So that's one bit of advice for artists who are looking for inspiration, is you just go for a walk. At least this works for me, and I'll usually see something. Um, and if you go to my Instagram, most of the stuff that I post is little paintings that I do, and they're often things that I've seen while I'm walking. And I see something and I go, okay, why did my eye go to that scene? I don't even know why, but there's something that attracted me, and so I'll try to paint it if I can on location. But more often than not, I take a quick snap of it with my iPhone or a few photos, and then I'll study it later and try and think about, well, what is it about that scene that, why was I looking at it? And then painting helps me to understand, um, what I remember about that scene. So, yeah, I find that's endlessly inspiring, going on a long walk, taking photos of things that you notice, going back and drawing them, because it's not always practical to sit out in the middle of the street with a sketchbook. Um, that and the other things that I find I take inspiration from are tiny little plant objects, microorganisms, like pictures of microorganisms, and really small sea creatures. Like, I think because they look a bit strange, but we also recognize them. They're kind of things that hover in between familiar and unfamiliar. And those are the things I'm always looking for, at least in my type of work, which is sort of this weird surrealist stuff. But always fascinated by particularly small marine creatures, and it probably comes from growing up on the beach and spending so much time looking in rock pools. But yeah, that's an endless source of inspiration. Never get tired of, either in real life or in pictures and books or under a microscope, is looking at these little tiny, tiny living things.
That's awesome. Speaking of, I guess, tiny things or big things with this question, which I love, is do you have something silly you draw for fun? So Michelle has said she personally likes drawing the goldfish with big heads. Is there something that you kind of go to for fun to draw?
Something, I think all of it is silly stuff that I draw for fun. I think I often draw these big-eyed things all the time, and I'm not sure why. Someone asked me about it recently. Like, often if it's a self-portrait, I draw it as this big-eyed creature, just almost like the whole head is an eyeball. And one of the reasons why it's fun is because it's easy. For me, easy things are fun, and it's circles, just a bunch of circles that turn into this. Again, I've probably got some examples here. There's one creature that often, when I can't think of anything else to do, I end up drawing this one thing. God, I have to try and find it now. But yeah, I'm also aware that I kind of repeat myself over and over by drawing these giant one-eyed things. Sorry, I can't even remember where it is now.
You're okay. It reminds me a little bit of the poster with the big, beautiful.
Yeah, there's an example. I mean, that's just a typical one. It's like always these things with whether they're robots or, like this thing on the cover, this big eye. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. I think the story about Eric, the little foreign exchange student, that also came about because it was just a shape I found super easy to draw, and I liked drawing it. So there he is there. Just the head. It's like it's a curve and then an angle, and there's something very pleasing, a bit like handwriting or something, of doing that shape. So turned into a story eventually. But yeah, I try to keep things really simple. And that's another, I guess, another bit of advice I could give for young artists is just try to keep things pretty simple. Complicated stops being fun. You want things to be complex. They can be complex, but still simple. So a good example of that is a flower. Okay, it's actually a pretty simple thing. It's got this center and it's got petals coming out. But if you look closely at the petals and everything, they're very, very complex. It's like you can go in infinitely and find more things in there, but the whole thing is simple. So a lot of people make the mistake of thinking, oh, that's, if it's simple, it's not complex. It can be both. A good work of art is simple and complex, but not complicated. Complicated is lots of things and details that don't relate to each other. Simple is lots of details that all meaningfully relate to one thing. So when a picture's good, you can almost point at it and you get a sense it's about just this one thing, even if you can't describe what that is, because all the parts relate. Like a good piece of music, everything just connects up. Yeah, I forgot what the original question was.
That has answered it brilliantly and kind of links again. You're doing this perfect loop and segue into the next questions that I've got to ask. And we've got a beautiful chat going with a whole bunch of questions from people. So Tag wanted to know, what do you think distinguishes your style and how do you organize your work and projects? Which you touched on with the schedule. So we might leave that bit because we've done the schedule. But what do you think distinguishes your style?
The first thing I'd say is I try not to think too much about my style. I think other people are much better at identifying my style than I am, because to me, the things that I draw just look kind of normal. There's no style, if you know what I mean. I don't see a style in them. But obviously there is one. It's a bit like personality. If somebody asked you, describe your personality, it's like, well, you sort of could, but It'd sound more like a zodiac type description, and you'd probably be getting it a bit wrong. And then your friends would, especially your family, would come in and say, "No, no, no, that's not your personality. You're like this, this, this." So, I don't. The short answer is, I think about my style about as much as I think about my personality, and that is almost never, because I'm too busy being that person to think about it. And it's the same when you're drawing. You should be too busy drawing and painting your subject to think about yourself. Um, so don't think about your style. Style will just come naturally. I remember this one artist, um, a painter I really like, who does these kind of very messy abstract paintings or semi-abstract, called Frank Auerbach, who died recently. But he said, paint style is not something that you choose. It's what you do in an emergency. And the best kind of drawing is when you're sitting outside, for instance, and drawing from life. Um, like I'd be out in the bush, sitting on a rock, drawing a landscape, and ants are biting my ankles. And some of my best drawings came out of those situations. Hot, I'm hungry, ants are biting me. I just want to get this drawing done as fast as possible. And I did some really good work because it was a kind of emergency. And that's when my real style came out, when I'm not thinking too much. So, and personality is the same way. You know how people's personality really is when there's a crisis. So every drawing you do, every work of art is going to be a little crisis, because it starts off fun and then it gets a bit tricky, and then it reaches a point where you kind of hate it, and then you keep working and it starts to get better again towards the end. So that's another bit of advice I would say is, if you start hating the way your picture looks, that's normal. That happens with every single thing that I do. It's about 3/4 of the way in. I kind of hate it. And then I keep going and I go, oh, it's not so bad after all. Um, so yeah, I think style, I don't think about. The style is your response to the subject and you thinking about the subject. Your job is to the subject. That's it. You just think about the subject. You try to draw the best thing you can while looking at your subject, and you try to be your subject, and then your style will come out. So yeah, so I don't really know what my style is, and I don't think I've ever seen my true style, to be honest, because I haven't done enough work to know what my real style is. I've only actually worked in quite a narrow way. So that's the other great thing about art, is there's always more to explore, and hopefully, it's a sort of job you can keep doing it well into your 90s, and you'll still be hopefully finding new things that are interesting to do.
That's fantastic. And I do think that's something that we see, kids start to question, especially with the art workshops that we run. It's a lot about like, how do I find my style? What do I find my style? And I think that's fantastic advice of just create, and it will come, and it's kind of not for you to decide.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bryony's asked a really beautiful question, which you've just started to touch on. She said, you've had a lot of success. Do you ever feel doubt about what you're making, and how do you push past that?
Yes, all the time, all the time. I think sometimes it's good just to have some work that you've done that you like, where you think you got it right, that you can look at from time to time, to reassure yourself that, yes, I can do it. So, I mentioned that painting that I did when I was about 20, and that's kind of one of those things where I kind of look at it and go, okay, you can paint. Don't forget, you do know how to paint. Um, and that can help you get back up. I think there's a lot to be said for the fallow field, and that's, like when farmers would just leave a field empty without crop for a while, and it sort of rejuvenates the soil. And I think, just don't, if work starts feeling difficult, just stop doing it for a period. I've wasted a lot of time, I think, just plugging away at things that weren't working, like trying to do CPR on a patient that's not responding. And sometimes it's better to just, walk away and do something else and then come back.
Brilliant. Zach has been asking some fantastic questions, but we actually got one from his dad, which was, how do you judge when an idea is in your sketchbook and it's ready now to come out and be a piece?
When I keep thinking about it, that's basically it. If I keep thinking about it and going back to it and thinking, like just before giving this talk, I was looking through a really old sketchbook I found because I was going, I've got to show some sketchbooks. So what if people ask me about sketches? And this one is from 2000, and it's just full of like lots of tiny writing and little pictures, and the stuff I can't remember because it's 25 years ago now. And a lot of it's pretty awful drawing, but some of it's really good. And some of the ideas, I'm like, wow, that's a really good idea. I've just forgotten about it. So the part of the problem that you have is not trying to pick a good idea, is trying to choose among many good ideas. So if you're really working in your sketchbook a lot, you're going to end up with a ton of pretty good ideas. And then it's like, well, which one do I do? So yeah, the short answer is it's the one that I just come back to and I go, that's, even after all these years, that still looks pretty interesting to me. And often it'll be something that's been sitting around for about 5 years. And then I'll come back to it and go, actually, it's still kind of relevant. It stood the test of time in my memory. It doesn't look stupid, because many of them do end up looking stupid or they don't make sense. But some of them, they still have some poetry to them. Obviously, kids aren't going to want to wait around 5 years, but it's still, you do a whole bunch of drawings, like 20, and you pick the best one. So the trick is just to do a lot, and then you pick the ones that are the best. But generally, you'll find most ideas, if you start developing them, they will become good. It's like most seeds, if you plant them, they will grow into plants. So it's just about giving them time. Often people get too hung up on the notion of having a good idea. You don't really need a good idea. You just need to work. You just need to get started. A good idea will come, but lots of good ideas will come. It's like a conversation. Nobody goes to meet their friend for coffee and then they think, oh, but what if I can't talk about anything, you know? Well, you feel that way normally, but then you get there and you trust that there's going to be a conversation. It's an act of faith. And when you draw, you are having a conversation with your piece of paper and the lines. So you just got to trust that there's going to, something interesting will happen. And don't worry about getting a good idea. Just start drawing, just start doing something.
Wonderful. Bryony has asked now your, I guess, thoughts. Which contemporary artists or illustrators are you into right now? Like, who are you looking at, admiring their work, or enjoying seeing pieces come from?
That's a good question. What artists am I looking at the moment? I was looking at this Swedish artist, Simon Stallenhag, who does this sort of kind of futuristic landscapes, but they're set in the past. And he's quite an interesting artist because he also does these kind of narrative illustrated books. And I think a lot of us are drawn to this form, but we're not quite sure how to do them because there's not really an industry set up for doing these kinds of books. That is experimental stories with pictures. And he managed to do a lot of his books through crowdfunding because no one's going to publish this stuff. And he's become hugely successful by just doing the thing that he loves and committing to it, but just because nobody else wanted to publish it. And that's kind of, I'd never thought about crowdfunding, but that's also another option for artists these days. It's a great way of getting projects up and proving that you've got an audience for them. I sort of I'm looking lately at a lot of older artists that whose work I used to look at but haven't looked at for a long time. So and ones that I'd forgotten about. Sometimes they pop up on Instagram and I'm reminded, oh yeah, that artist, and then I go back and I study them more thoroughly. Particularly sort of early 20th century artists and people that I might have missed out on when I was studying art at high school and uni. There was a lot of artists that I missed. So I'm always going back to find out more about them. A lot of women artists that weren't talked about when I was studying art history, they were kind of skipped over. And I'm going back and looking at their work. And I'm also interested in what's called outsider art, and that's art by people who aren't artists. Um, but their work is really great. So people have a lot of talent, but no formal training. A bit like children's art. Another reason why I'm interested in these awards. I'm interested in creativity without formal training, and what kind of originality comes out of that. It's really hard to see genuinely original art sometimes because we're all sort of copying each other. But occasionally somebody does something that's so weird that I can't help looking at it, and then I just want to find out everything about that artist. And they're often somebody who's not really an artist.
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of talked about your scheduling and how you plan out your projects, but Kelly wanted to know, what does a regular work day look like to you? Are you disciplined 8 hours a day in the office, or are you strolling in the park, sitting in cafes and kind of waiting for inspiration to hit, or a mix of the two?
I wish. I'm looking after kids and I'm doing the dishes and vacuuming. That's what I'm doing. What are you all doing? um, yeah, that's pretty much it. My actual time for creative work in the past 10 years has been extremely narrow. Um, so back when I had more time and less responsibility, um, I I didn't even then I didn't have a structured day. It just never seemed to work out. I'd have a plan that this is what I'm going to do, but the interesting thing about creative work is it's not very structured or predictable. Um, but I usually start the day like most people. I'm answering emails, and sometimes that might end up taking the whole day. Because the thing about being an artist too is that, especially if you're a freelance artist, is you're running a small business. And so, if you ask me at any particular point, what did you do today? I'm most likely to say I was fixing a software problem and doing my taxes, you know? But it's like it's still the massive chunk of my day is spent with administrative stuff and preparing to do creative work. And then occasionally there's a little patch where you do creative work. But that's kind of a nice thing because I realize I've had periods where I've had a lot of time to do creative work and I've become a bit burnt out. So I think it's good to have this balance between washing dishes and doing tax and going in some social obligation and then a little bit of creative work and then answering emails and this sort of stuff. So I realize more and more that you do need a certain amount of recharging of your imagination. You can't be like using it all the time. And so, I just accept that's the reality. But yeah, I'm not really wandering around waiting for inspiration to strike. If I get a free hour, bang, I'm straight in. And it's like I said, I don't wait for an idea. I just start working. I got to be doing something to make use of that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I cannot believe we're nearly at the end. So I've got one more question from the audience and then one more to kind of wrap up and finalize this. But it is honestly, we could talk to you forever. This has been so amazing. And I think you give such great, genuine advice. So it's very heartfelt and just, yeah, nuggets of wisdom throughout the whole thing, which has been
Thanks.
fantastic. And I think our audience is finding the same. So our last one from Zach, which I just think is quite lovely, is do you like to draw with a family member or a friend? Like, do you ever do any kind of side along social stuff? Do you get your kids involved when they're a little bit younger?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've done it sometimes. I haven't done it in ages actually. It's like where I, sit down. My wife's an artist too, so I remember we'd occasionally sort of draw on things. I remember one time went out with a bunch of illustrators to a Vietnamese restaurant, and they just happened to use paper for tablecloths, like just big sheets of paper. And so we were just laughing our heads off, drawing all this stuff all over and that was a great time. So I've always forgotten that drawing can be a great social activity because it's a form of thinking beyond speech. And that's what I love about drawing too, is when I draw, there's parts of me that are thinking that don't otherwise think. They think in lines and shapes and different types of connections, and that's why art is such an important thing to have in your life. You know, same with music or other languages, because they facilitate a whole different part of you that's thinking about things. I think there's a lot of parts of your mind that are subconsciously processing experience, but we're not accessing that. And when you draw or listen to music, it opens up these little channels, and all this stuff starts coming up, and you realize that you're much smarter than you think you are, and you also know a lot more, and you feel a lot more than you think you do, and you have a lot more opinions than you think you do. But you never know until you start writing or drawing or playing music or doing, dancing or doing something expressive. That's Most of our culture is this talking, and we need to sort of spend a little bit of time doing non-verbal kind of thinking. And I think that's something our ancestors did a lot. So everybody would be, sitting around doing crafts in the evening, that sort of stuff, or painting together, or like, as with the question, drawing together, and doodling in the sand and stuff like that. I think, yeah, it's a real fun thing to do. Well, that exercise which I would recommend doing with your friends, um, where you fold a piece of paper and you draw something, but you always have a few lines coming down, and then you give it to the person, and then they carry on drawing, and then at the end it's always amazing. Like, and no one's uncreative in that situation. It just goes to show that creativity, all it needs is a few lines and a bunch of friends looking on expectantly. That's your deadline, and you will come up with something really good.
Yeah. I've forgotten about that activity. I think I'm gonna have to bring it back. We do some free drawing stuff in the April school holidays to try and give people a chance to test out pastels and different mediums and stuff. We might have to do that one and
Yeah.
get the room building and artwork together, because it is lots of fun and it's amazing to see what comes out. The final thing I want to end on, and it might be a tricky one because we've covered so much and you've given so much great advice around how to just kind of like start and have those deadlines and to get going. But we are working with young artists. It's such a vital point where that encouragement is so important to keep them creating and to keep them kind of in that bubble, like you talk about, with them building what they want to build. What's something that you wish you'd known as a young artist, or something that you wish was shared with you when you were starting out in your journey?
Um, I think it like if I could go back in time and give myself some advice, I would probably say, you can make a good living as an artist, because I really didn't believe it until my mid-20s, and I think I sort of spent a lot of time trying out other jobs or thinking about other careers because I was too afraid to do visual arts. And then once I sort of tapped into the world of illustration, and I went through that sort of narrow corridor, it kind of branched out, and I realized, man, there's a ton of visual arts jobs in all sorts of industries, but you don't really hear about them when you're a high school student, because a lot of them are really obscure, like a lighting director in animation. I mean, that's a really creative, interesting, artistic job. I never heard about it until I started work. Well, the job didn't exist when I was a high school student. So, I think, the main thing I would have said to myself is just keep practicing drawing. Like, that is the main thing that's gonna be helpful to you, of all the things that you're doing, is drawing skill. Just get really good at drawing stuff, and the only way that's gonna happen is practicing. Just constantly drawing, going to drawing classes. I think if and there's how to draw books. They're really good, like, really good. Most of them are pretty good. I think you can learn a great deal just from how to draw books. So just learning to draw really well, and once you got those skills, especially being able to draw people, um, then you can do anything, It's like that unlocks everything if you can draw well.
What a incredible place to end, I think, is encouraging everyone to keep practicing. I think everyone's going to be missing their bedtimes now and drawing and drawing and drawing. So we might have angry emails tomorrow, but that's fine. Look, we've just got a chat full of people who are very, very grateful for your time, as are we here. We genuinely really appreciate the patronage you give the awards, everything you put into it over the year, and now doing this additional workshop with us, and then being able to share the recording as well. So just a big heartfelt thank you for your time, Shaun. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone for joining online. We have enjoyed all your questions. So thank you to everyone, and big thank you to you, Shaun.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks for facilitating. Thanks everybody for coming. Hope I haven't been droning on too much.
Not at
It's
all.
nice to have an opportunity to talk about some of this stuff. So yeah, I've enjoyed it too.
Wonderful. And yeah, we look forward to seeing all the entries. I know you do too, and we get to share them with you. And good luck with everyone's drawings and entering the awards. We can't wait to see the art this year.
Yeah, I agree. Yep, looking forward to it.
Wonderful. And we'll be in touch with you soon, Shaun, about the next phases. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.
Wonderful. I'll stop the recording. There we go.